179 days to go if you're a UK citizen living here in France. You know what we're talking about. And with Brexit on the minds, our gaze turns to the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, where on the eve of the leader's speech, enter the plan of Theresa May's government to restrict visas for lower-skilled workers and to treat EU nationals the same as any other migrant. How will that sit in Brexit negotiations? What status for UK nationals on the continent? Can a closed-border Britain be open for business? Earlier, we heard May's main rival within the party, Boris Johnson, rail against the Prime Minister's Chequers plan for a soft Brexit on trade and argue in favour of an extension of the Brexit transition period until the end of 2020. More broadly, it's both Britain and the EU considering US-style pre-screening for tourists, a minor hindrance for travellers, or the prelude to much tighter border controls all around. Today we are manning the borders in the France 24 debate. With us, an Englishwoman in Paris, Shoshana Fine, who covers migration issues for the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From London, Andre Walker, columnist for the New York Observer. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, good to see you.
Lionel Grotto is the CEO of Paris Region Enterprises. Your job, well, to tout the virtues of Paris and of France as a place to do business after Brexit.
Exactly.
Thank you for being with us, and thanks as well to historian Diane Cooper-Richet, author of La France Anglaise, English France, from the Revolution to today. There's a whole section devoted to how British some parts of France are
almost British.
Are almost British, with British mayors. We'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later on. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Theresa May says the immigration policy she's unveiling delivers on the vote of the referendum and takes back control of Britain's borders. Under the plan, high-skilled workers will get priority, while the number of low-skilled migrants will be curbed. May also suggesting in her proposals that applicants meet a minimum salary threshold, no cap on student visas, but they have to be able to speak English, and a new system, as we were saying, of e-gates for fast-track access to tourists and business visiting from, quote, low-risk countries.
It ensures that we bring an end to free movement once and for all. And for the first time in decades, it will be the UK government determining how many people who can come to the United Kingdom. And yes, this system will be based on skills. It'll be based not on where somebody comes from, but on how they can contribute to our economy.
Not on where somebody comes from, but how they can contribute to our economy. Your reaction, Shoshana Fine?
I mean, I think this whole proposition is basically underpinned by the notion that migrants to Britain are either a problem or a threat, right? So it feeds right into this securitized discourse that we can actually see more generally with reference to Europe and migrants who come from beyond European borders. So, we have to ask, will reducing migration really benefit Britain? Certainly on an economical level, we can see that Britain is going to really suffer from reducing migrants. And then will the welfare state will benefit from reducing migrants coming into Britain? And no, it won't. Migrants contribute to Britain, and they are key actors working in some of the kind of fundamental institutions that make the welfare state alive today, and notably the NHS, the British health system. So the British health system has already started to suffer massively because of the Brexit and the hostile climate towards European migrants.
Andre Walker, when we heard Theresa May doing the rounds of morning shows this morning, the question we were wondering was, will this discourage people who work in things like services, in the hotel business, in nursing? Will it discourage foreigners from coming?
Well, I think there is certainly a hope within the United Kingdom that we will discourage low-skilled workers. After all, whilst immigration grows GDP overall, it reduces per capita GDP. And I think a lot of communities in the north of England, particularly where I'm from, are concerned about the fact that low-skilled workers are undercutting local labour and reducing wages. And certainly that was a huge concern in the Brexit debate. So I think what the Conservatives have said today is that immigrants are welcome in the United Kingdom. Bear in mind, the United Kingdom is allowing EU nationals to remain, whereas there's no agreement on the EU side about British nationals remaining on the continent. But what they're also saying is, look, we want people who are going to contribute to our economy. We don't want to undercut low-skilled local labour in the United Kingdom. We don't want guys on council estates in Sheffield to be unable to get a job because somebody from Lithuania turns up and takes it instead.
Will they want to take those jobs? That's the question a lot of people are asking.
Well, it's silly, isn't it, for us to pay for people to be on the dole, to take unemployment benefits, and then to import people from Europe to take the jobs that people are refusing to do. I think it makes much more sense for us to deal with our problem with unemployment in the United Kingdom by pushing people into jobs rather than allowing people to sit on benefits potentially for decades and then replacing them in the employment market with people from across the EU. But always remember what the Conservatives have said today. And I think it is important to bear in mind that skilled workers from France, bankers from Dusseldorf and Paris are all going to be as welcome as they've ever been in the United Kingdom. But if you want to come to the United Kingdom, firstly, to claim benefits, or secondly, to undercut somebody who really is struggling to get a job anyway in the United Kingdom, then you know what? It's better to stay in your own country.
Not sure if the numbers support that, Lionel Croteau, about whether migrants coming in come to claim benefits. But your thoughts on just allowing high-skilled workers to come in?
Well, first there's a question on the capacity of this proposal to go through the negotiations between the EU and the UK, which is one point. So next thing is Can
you just let in one without the other?
I'm sorry?
Can you just let in the high-skilled workers and not the low-skilled workers?
I think it's a problem because the EU has been built on this freedom of movement, and it makes a problem to have a distinction now, like by a category of workers, and say, okay, I want the highly talented workers. I understand the proposal of Theresa May because we see today that the UK companies are being have a challenge of recruiting today international talents. It's something we see in the companies that from the UK that come to some of them come to Paris. They tell us that it's more difficult today to attract international talents there, to recruit them.
And are these the high-end talents or the low-end talents, or both?
The ones we are seeing are more the highly skilled workers, since the movement for now is being concentrated mostly 70% of the projects on finance, because on finance there was a loss of the loss of the financial passport, allowing for operations in Europe is sure, and so those companies, they know they need to relocate in some ways. Finance, it's highly skilled workers.
Shoshana Fine?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the proposition doesn't make any sense. A lot of European labour, yes, we have highly skilled European migrants, but we also have a lot of low-skilled migrants, and Britain needs that. They're filling in jobs that Britain needs in sectors, as I mentioned, like the NHS, like in hotels, restaurants, this kind of thing. And I just think that the person who was speaking before, prior to yourself, just kind of spoke like it was a zero-sum game, as if the more immigrants came, that we were taking away British jobs. But that's absolutely not the case. Immigrants are also contributing to the growth of Britain and the creation of jobs. So you really have to not think about this as a zero-sum game. This is plainly wrong.
But it's a remarkably racist point, isn't it? That British people are unable to clean their own toilets. Therefore, we have to bring over Polish people to do it. The truth of the matter is, British people ought to be capable of doing these low-skilled jobs. There are plenty of low-skilled people on unemployment benefits at the moment. And the idea that what we should do as a country is pay these people to do no work and then replace them with people from abroad is absolutely crazy. But let me say something else about this. It's amazing how hypocritical the European Union is on this. The European Union are the people who say that they want some sort of an EFTA requirement on British people after Brexit. It's the EU that have not promised British people living on the continent any sort of guarantees of being able to stay there permanently. What we've said is we will still allow European people to come over where they have the skills, and we will say to every European person that lives in the United Kingdom now that they will be allowed to remain. The EU has not done the same thing.
All right,
so
let's pick up on that point.
It's remarkably hypocritical. It's remarkably hypocritical to listen to people in Paris moaning about the British position when actually, in truth, you guys have not done as much as we have.
All right, let's listen to the Home Secretary while announcing the end of preferential treatment for EU citizens entering the UK. Theresa May's Interior Minister telling the Conservative Party conference he won't be coming after those who are already there.
I say to those EU citizens who have already made the UK their home, you have benefited our country. You are part of our country, part of many of our families, part of our home. So let me be very clear. Deal or no deal. We want you to stay. We need you to stay. You can stay.
Diana Cooper-Richet, your reaction to this and your thoughts on the fate of British subjects like yourself after Brexit?
I'm a 19th century historian. In the 19th century, English people came to France, high-skilled, low-skilled. And the lowly skilled workers that came to France contributed enormously to the development of the textile industry, of the steel industry. All sorts of industries were greatly benefited from the workers that came from Britain. And at the same time, there were very highly skilled people who came from Britain, and they also contributed a lot to France's culture, France's painting, France's the haute couture was invented by a someone from Britain. So I think that I agree with you. All this is very beneficial.
But where is Jean-Claude Juncker at the State of the Union address in the European Parliament, what was it, last week, standing up saying, deal or no deal, British people are welcome in the European Union? So to be critical of Sajid Javid today, when he has made a promise that the EU have consistently refused and failed to make, and then complain the British are being unfair on immigration, is just a remarkable act of hypocrisy. The European Union should give the promise to British people in the European Union that they can remain in the same way that the British government has given a deal or no deal promise to European citizens living in Britain.
Shoshana Fine, is it up to the European Union to guarantee that EU citizens can continue to work here on the continent?
I mean,
British citizens can.
I think absolutely they should. I would very much hope that this will be the case. Being primarily, being concerned by that directly, but for other British people like myself living in European countries. But I think that it's extremely sad that this might be only for those of us that have already left, that have already got residence in European member states, like what will happen in Britain. So it's okay for those that have already settled, but what about future generations? What about future...
Hang on a second. You're complaining that it might only be for you, yet you are living in a territory, France, that has not yet made the commitment that Britain has made. Britain has said, deal or no deal, EU citizens currently in the United Kingdom will be allowed to stay. That is a commitment the British government made.
I think that this is a commitment that the European... This should be recognised.
That specifically the European Union has so far refused to make.
Shoshana Fine.
Almost day one after the Brexit referendum, the British government made this pledge.
Shoshana Fine.
I think that the European member states should absolutely make this pledge to make us feel safe. I think this is very important. But I think what Britain is doing is trying to make immigrants, those that are there right now, feel unsafe, and for prospective immigrants that want to come. You know, Britain created a hostile climate for third country immigrants, that is to say immigrants that come from out of the European Union, and they are now extending this to those from the European Union. And I think that this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. This is dangerous.
What makes you feel more safe? Sajid Javid standing up saying, deal or no deal, you can remain in the United Kingdom, or Jean-Claude Juncker, Guy Verhofstadt and all their chums making no such commitments for British people like yourself in France?
I think British people who are abroad
Why on earth is it the British government's fault that the European Union has failed to replicate the deal or no deal commitment that Britain has made?
But what about the British government creating a climate of hostility for future generations? You know, people are leaving Britain today because European citizens that still have the right to be there, because there's been kind of normalisation of racism towards citizens from European member states.
One at a time, Andre Walker, let Shoshana finish. Please, one at a time.
OK, the fact of the matter is...
Shoshana, fine. One at a time, please. Shoshana, fine.
OK, so what we have seen is the creation... This has not got a legal dimension yet, but politically we've seen the creation of second-class citizens, and we have seen a dramatic increase in racist acts towards these people. So what we've seen is a normalisation of xenophobia, a normalisation of racism, which has been kind of taken on by mainstream parties. And this is very dangerous for the future of a democratic Britain.
It's a very unhealthy battle. That's a certainty.
Hang on. You found it difficult to answer this because you've got no answer to this. A Frenchman sat next to me in London has got a guarantee that even if he remains a French citizen, he will be allowed to remain in the United Kingdom. Where you're sat in Paris as a British citizen, you have no such guarantee because the EU has specifically refused to give that guarantee. Now, I get that you don't like Brexit. I fully understand that. But you are a British national in Paris who is complaining to me about xenophobia and racism, and yet the jurisdiction of the European Union, the EU, has refused to give you a guarantee that a French person sat next to me has got from the British government time and time again, confirmed again today.
Lionel Grotto, what do you think the European Union's message should be to UK nationals living in France and elsewhere?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer clearly that question. The clear thing is today it's unclear for the companies present in the UK and for their employees if what will happen on Brexit plus one day. And on this,
let's pick up on that point because we have to take a quick break. But what will the status be of UK citizens here in France and across the continent? We'll be talking about it when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're talking on the heels of Theresa May unveiling her immigration policy post-Brexit. With us, Shoshana Fine, who covers migration issues for the European Council on Foreign Relations, the ECFR, from London. Andre Walker, columnist for the New York Observer. Welcome back as well to Lionel Grotto, CEO of Paris Region Enterprises, and historian Diana Cooper-Richet, author of La France Anglaise, English France from the Revolution till today. English France. There's a lot of English France, isn't there? There's a few mayors in France, I believe, who are English.
There's a lot of English France. There has been for a long time. I mean, the British have been coming to France, since the end of the 18th century. There was the Grand Tour at that time. They were basically aristocrats and higher middle class people. Some of them came with their horses, with their coaches, with their hounds, and they bought properties here. So what has changed is the type of people that are here now in France. People that come to France now are more modest people. They want to buy a house they can't buy in Britain. And so they've been doing it for the last 40 years, basically. Pensioners and other people.
So research for your book took you to which parts of France?
It took me mainly to archives and then to different parts of France. But you can get most of the things out of the archives, out of people's memoirs and that kind of thing.
What is it? 60% of the words in the English language come from French.
A lot of words come.
You feel that bond. And today, with this Brexit issue coming up, there's the question of what's going to happen. You're also a French national.
I'm a French national. I'm also a British citizen.
So the problem doesn't arise for you as it does for Shoshana Fine. What advice would you give, Shoshana, to UK citizens living in France right now? Do they apply for a residency permit? Do they apply for citizenship? What should they do?
I mean, we are living in very dangerous times, basically. I think, citizenship is the way forward. If you are eligible for citizenship, then you should absolutely go ahead and apply. And that is for UK citizens living in UK, as it is for British citizens living in the Schengen area. But I think, just coming back from your point there, I think it's a really important one. We need to have a paradigm shift. We need to stop thinking about migration as a problem. Migration is something normal that has been going on since the beginning of human existence, and it's something that has, we've got 3% of the world's population who are migrants today. This is a normal phenomenon of global societies, and it needs to be accepted as such. And one other point on that matter is that, May is talking about wanting to reduce migration through now imposing these barriers on EU migrants. But actually, what have we seen with third country nationals? The UK wanted to reduce migration coming to Britain, but actually didn't succeed because people use other routes. Family reunification, for instance, is a very important one. Immigrants who are already settled in Britain have the rights to family life.
Lionel Grotto, just a point that you were mentioning just before the break, UK citizens, some of them you're saying interested in coming to France, but unsure what their status will be if they come here?
What we see for sure is that the companies based in the UK, independently from the nationalities, and the fact is the companies in the UK have very international staff. It is the normal way of doing business in the UK today, and London has built its strength and its stronghold in finance and other sectors on the capacity to attract those talents. So I'd say independently from the fact those companies hire British, European, or maybe Chinese people, the question which is asked to any of them is, in the moment when the company, because they face we've not talked about it till now, but they face critical questions about the continuity of their activity. We've talked about finance and the loss of the financial passport, but if you take industry, so the decisions in industry are very long to be taken. So you're not going to see from the morning to the other an investment decision which is as huge as the ones we've seen in finance for now. But clearly it's ahead of us. And all those moves that could come, they will come naturally.
That threat, for instance, of by Airbus to move its factory out of Britain, is that a serious one?
Yeah, but actually, some CEOs of international companies with a strong staff in London have warned their whole staff 1 week or 2 weeks before Brexit, before the vote, of the consequences of Brexit. And today we are just seeing what it really means about the fact maybe a production line won't be able to continue because the product can't be certified by the European regulator of the sector, or maybe the chemical product.
Statist man.
It's really what people who manage those companies are saying to us today.
Andre Walker?
Well, it's just a very, very continental European view, isn't it? That business can only exist if the government can regulate it to heck. Whereas I take the view, actually, what we need in order to be prosperous and rich is a global economy, and for government to set us free.
But if you have parts from an assembly line that come from the continent, you can't have tariffs there.
Well, why do we need tariffs? We could, as the United Kingdom, as a free and independent nation, we could unilaterally have no tariffs at all. Why do we need them? Look, The truth of the matter is, when you are a lover of the European Union, you believe that the only way to set business free is to regulate them heavily. The only way to make people rich is to tax them heavily. The only way to any sort of prosperity is if the government gives it to you. Whereas I actually take a rather more British Anglo-Saxon view, which is this: we need low tax, which we're not getting. We need low regulation, which we're not getting. We need to be able to do trade deals right across the world, not just to only be able to trade with our neighbours, which we're not getting in the European Union. Look, the European Union, continental countries, have always been insular in terms of the little European continent, and Britain has always been a believer in global trade, and that is what we wish to return to.
All right. Not sure when you look at the size of some of the economies, including Germany and France. That brings us to the topic of Boris Johnson, because these were some of his talking points when he spoke on the sidelines of the Conservative Party conference. He railed against the Chequers plan for close trading ties with the continent that the Prime Minister is touting, the one that made Johnson quit the government. The former Foreign Secretary also asking Brussels for an extension.
Tech, data, biosciences, financial services, you name it, we're the leaders. And we can use our regulatory freedom to entrench and to intensify those advantages. And of course, our European friends and partners can see that that might be possible. And that's exactly why they want to constrain us. And yet I would argue that it's actually in their interests too, to have the 5th largest economy in the world on their doorstep, acting as a continuing brake and caution to the over-regulatory instincts that have held the EU back, held EU growth back for so long.
Johnson, who went on to say that he wants to use the otherwise redundant and miserable implementation period to the end of 2020 to negotiate a Super Canada Free Trade Agreement to invest in all the customs procedures that will need to ensure continued frictionless trade. Shoshana Fine?
But if you look at...
I mean, I think that, Europe has to be very, very careful here. Boris Johnson was going on about Chequers, but Chequers has basically been refused by the European Union. Boris Johnson wants a hard Brexit. I think the EU has to have a very tough stance on a hard or a soft Brexit, for that matter, because not only does Brexit threaten Britain, and of course it threatens Britain first, but it also threatens the European process. If Britain is seen as a success, then this could, strengthen.
So what? So they should punish Britain
What a
for
remarkable!
leaving?
What a remarkable!
I don't see it as a punishment, but I see it as believing in the European project and being very firm about the 4 freedoms and keeping them. They are an essential part of the European project, and I think it's very important that the deal with Britain does not strengthen anti-European parties. That we don't know. The European Union doesn't exist for that long. Temporality, time doesn't necessarily equal progress. We can always go back in time.
What a sad sight to see a British national
people to come to France, because there are more and more Brits buying houses in France before it's too late. So sometimes the reactions are very different, and they believe that it's still possible to do something.
Andre Walker, before I get your reaction, I just want to give you and want your reaction to this. The words of the former Belgian Prime Minister. He is Guy Verhofstadt, member of the European Parliament, and that deadline extension request by Boris Johnson, well, going down like a lead balloon with him. Same with the Home Secretary's immigration plan. Let's listen.
We will never accept discrimination based on skills and on nationality, as David this morning proposed. Secondly, that we will never accept, and I say it also very clearly to the British colleagues here, an extension of this whole procedure. Mr. Boris Johnson this morning has said, look, we want an extension of Article 50. I think it's a very bad idea. Enough mess has been created by Brexit. Enough uncertainty has been created by Brexit. Let's stop.
Andre Walker, your reaction.
Is that Guy Verhofstadt, the funny little man with the bad teeth? Look, nobody's asking for an extension of anything. There is going to be an implementation period. What I think we're saying is, rather than argue about this Chequers deal, look, the EU has said Chequers is a bad deal. Most of the British Parliament has said that Chequers is a bad deal as well. But always remember something about the irresponsibility now of the European Union. This backstop agreement that Theresa May was an absolute fool to agree to. What is it? £39 billion pounds plus the annexation of Northern Ireland. Now, of course, what the EU are stupid about, I'm Northern Irish myself, they believe that there's only terrorists on one side. They believe there's only pro-Irish terrorists. But, of course, there's pro-British terrorists as well. And let me tell you, the EU's plan to effectively annex Northern Ireland will cause a war. It is absolutely irresponsible from an organisation in Brussels that claims it wants to stop a European war to do this. I will tell you that the unionists,
so where do you put the border? Explain to us, Andre, where do you put the border? Do you put it in the Irish Sea, or do you put it between the two Irelands?
Well, hang on a second. There's a border at the moment, right? There's tobacco taxes that are different. There are petrol taxes that are different. There's regulations that are different in between the two territories. This idea of sticking up a border is a complete fallacy invented by the European Union. There are already rules on how to trade across the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. But the problem is, with the European Union, they don't understand the situation in Ireland, and they believe that the best solution is to effectively annex Northern Ireland. That will cause a war. The UVF and the LVF and various loyalist paramilitary groups will rise up, and that will cause an absolute nightmare.
So how do you explain to me, how do you respect the Good Friday agreements after Brexit? What's the plan?
There is a border there already, right? In what way do you not understand that there are different regulations between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland? In which way do you not understand that on things like tariffs, on things like
But you put back a physical border. Do you put back a physical border? Do you put back a physical border?
No. You want the physical border. What I'm saying is that when it comes to tobacco, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to petrol, when it comes to regulations, there is already a border, and we do not need to police it using modern technology. The truth of the matter is the EU want to put in a hard border, or they want to annex Northern Ireland. It is an extremely dangerous thing, and if you had any knowledge of Northern Irish politics and Irish politics, you would see the danger of that. But of course, Brussels is full of absolute fools.
But we can never come to any agreement if it becomes a war and a battle. You have to have
but the war is
proper.
One at a time. Diana Cooper-Richet. One at a time, please. Diana Cooper-Richet.
I think you have to have a proper negotiation and discuss it clearly, and not have a battle and be so offensive as you are being. Otherwise, you'll never get anywhere. Obviously.
Do you know what a hard border in Ireland or a border in the Irish Sea, either of them, does to the stability of the people of Northern Ireland? One of them, the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland, would cause the Republicans to rise up in violence. A border in the Irish Sea would cause the Loyalists to rise up in violence. Now, I don't like Theresa May. I think she's pretty bad. But to be fair, her idea of merely extending the existing the existing systems that we already have, that already police the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, is the way forward. The reason the EU don't want that idea is because they simply believe that the only people that need to be listened to are the Republicans. But I will tell you, the Loyalists and Unionists are equally as dangerous, and a border in the Irish Sea causes a war. Make no mistake, and viewers in France and across the world need to understand that.
All right.
We need to go back to cordial understanding.
Lionel Grotto, let me ask you, because we've talked a lot about how the UK, March 2019, it's coming up. We're uncertain about what's going to happen. The UK citizens living here in France are uncertain about whether they need to go to the préfecture to apply for residence permits. What needs to be done after March? It's still all up in the air at this point. What do you think of Boris Johnson's idea of extending the implementation period? Is that a sound one?
Well, I think the idea that Brexit has already gone too long is valuable. I mean, the fact today is that we see it in the debates. Think of a company hearing us today, or a citizen. They don't know what tomorrow will be done of. So it's really this thing about business and uncertainty not being friends, and clearly we see that the impact on companies, they need to decide today. So it's really hard for them to anticipate the consequences.
Lots of reactions on the hashtag F24 debates on both sides of this argument. In fact, it's more than two sides to this argument, as we know. One of them here: I worry a bit the government's pushing immigration controls as a sign they're delivering Brexit while actually undermining it with checkers. Checkers is the Prime Minister's plan for a close trading relationship with the EU after Brexit. Unlimited EU migration is a symptom, not the disease. Brexit was about more than immigration. It was about sovereignty. Your reaction to that, Shoshana Fine?
I mean, my reaction is that, the whole Brexit, the fundamental arguments for Brexit were taking back control, right? Control of our borders, control of British produce and whatnot. But actually, what can we see today? Complete uncertainty. The only thing we can be certain about is that we are in utter chaos.
Do you want, Andre Walker, for the UK to be treated like Canada? That's the proposition of Boris Johnson after Brexit?
Yes, I think so. And I think the problem with the Chequers deal is that effectively it makes us a vassal state. That is to say that we are a rule taker from Brussels, but we do not make the rules. So look, I didn't vote Brexit because I just wanted the MEPs and the Commissioner to go. I actually want Britain to become an independent nation again. And I think a free trade agreement between the EU and the United Kingdom is clearly the way forward. But look, one of the things that's difficult about this is pro-Europeans in Britain hate the Chequers deal by Theresa May. Anti-Europeans in Britain hate the Chequers deal by Theresa May. Macron hates the deal by Theresa May.
Perhaps we need another referendum then.
By Theresa May. Well, of course not, because the majority of British people wish to leave the European Union. And what we do is we leave the European Union, lock, stock and barrel, and then have a free trade agreement with the EU. That's the answer to all this. And always remember something. Look, the EU is not an unreasonable group of people. They have put up with us as the awkward squad for years. Fundamentally, this is a square peg and a round hole situation. We are not a member state of the EU, or we ought not to be a member state of the EU. And the EU will be better off without us, and I think we will be better off without the EU, but there needs to be a close trading relationship, and that is done
All right,
by
let me ask Diana Cooper-Richet, because we're running short on time here. Britain, you heard Andre Walker say Britain's always been the awkward squad. When you look at the time, since the revolution, just how European is Britain?
I don't know I have an exact answer to that, but what I do know for certain is that the British have always been very attracted to France. I mean, they've been coming when there was, for instance, the period of Napoleon, they stopped coming, but as soon as he fell, they started coming again. They were attracted to France. They liked to come to France for the theatre, for the food, to buy houses, to enjoy life. So they've always wanted to come to France, and they've always been coming. And so I think that probably, despite Brexit, they will probably continue to come to France. And we see they're still buying houses, as I said a few minutes ago.
All right, we're going to leave it there.
And
Unfortunately,
can I just make one final point? Look, British people love France and British people love Europe. We just don't want to be part of a superstate called Europe. You guys need to build your
message
superstate,
received,
and
Andre Walker in London.
We will not be part.
I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank as well Shoshana Fine, Lionel Grotto, and Diana Cooper-Richet. Your book is English France, La France Anglaise, published in French by Fayard. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon. Boris Johnson's speech, by the way, it wasn't at the main venue in Birmingham. It was sort of an off-Broadway kind of thing. It was a side venue.
That's it. Actually, the headline that I saw if I can find it here, in The Economist said that he was centre stage while being on at a side venue in any case.
Centre stage at a side venue, yes.
Exactly.
Well, that's a good way of putting it.
For whatever reason, the links that I was going to show you have disappeared. That's rather inconvenient. But anyway, there was one of the key moments that in the whole spin around this was Boris Johnson running through a field of wheat.
Explain that to us.
All right. Well, that was a reference to, Theresa May said last year during campaigning that the naughtiest thing she'd ever done was to run through a field of wheat, which obviously isn't a very naughty thing to do. And so he was essentially trolling her, and in trolling her, I suppose, essentially mocking the Prime Minister. So clearly there is an attempt here to undermine her authority through jokes, through viral images and whatnot. So he was photographed running through a field of wheat, and that can only be a reference to one thing, which was this remark made by Theresa May last year during campaigning, which a lot of people found ridiculous because one might have suspected that she could have done something at least a little bit naughtier at some time in her life. So it is getting somewhat nasty, and I suppose that the buzz or viral aspects of it are being weaponized by Boris Johnson, who in the past, of course, has been perfectly prepared to play the role of the clown if it is to serve his political message. And of course, the Brexit strategies have now completely, well, not completely, I suppose, but are significantly diverged. And indeed, we're seeing a major, Arlene Foster of the Democratic Unionist Party, propping up the Conservative government, has openly said that she is backing Boris Johnson's plan. So, indeed, the Irish issue, I had many links and tweets to show you, but unfortunately, technical hitch, is front and centre of that. And in fact, in Irish politics today, all day, Arlene Foster, in an interview she gave to The Telegraph, her remarks about the Good Friday Agreement, which has, of course, secured peace on the island of Ireland for so many years, that is not sacrosanct and it can be renegotiated in order to allow for a final Brexit deal to be struck. Basically, the entire Irish political establishment said absolutely not. It's not just a British referendum or political agreement. It was an international agreement between different states, and it was supported both in Northern Ireland by referendum and in the South at the time, or in the Republic of Ireland, and it is simply not open for renegotiation. So that issue shows the extent to which the whole Irish border question is central to a deal being struck.
Central to the deal being struck, and again, it seems to always come back to that when we have shows on Brexit, and we have them now almost on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. We still haven't resolved that issue of where you put the border, and that's seems
well for the DUP.
For
the DUP, there's a red line. It cannot go through the Irish Sea. That would break up the state of the United Kingdom, if you like. And Theresa May is clearly preparing to compromise on that issue, which is why we're seeing perhaps her coalition begin to become somewhat more fragile, and Arlene Foster openly supporting Boris Johnson's Brexit plan.
Theresa May, who will be addressing that Conservative Party conference on Wednesday. James Creedon, many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.